Lawrence Brownlee, congratulations on your new project, Rising, which takes Harlem Renaissance poems and sets them to music. And before we get started talking specifics about the project, I want to ask you about something Zora Neale Hurston said. She said, there are
Mhm.
years that ask questions and years that answer. And having commissioned Cycles of My Being by Tashawn Sori and Terrence Hayes, and now multiple composers for Rising, how would Hurston's perspective apply to the time between these two projects and their relationship to one another?
Well, I believe as an artist that I've matured. I feel like I have a little bit more understanding what I want to say, what I feel like my audience is, and my ability to get people interested using the writings of others. George James Earl Jones actually is one who said that he talked about him having a terrible stuttering problem, and he had a theater teacher who told him that he could use the work of others to really be meaningful in his own work. And so I take the same thing and the work of Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, Jesse Redmond Fawcett, Colleen Clark McKay. There's so many other people of the Harlem Renaissance that inspired us. A lot of people know about Langston Hughes and W.E. Du Bois, but they don't know about James Weldon Johnson and some of the other people. And so what Zora Neale Hurston said, I think is true. Time does focus you a bit. It gives you more insight, it gives you more perspective. And so that's what I wanted to do in Rising, to be a more mature and more informed artist.
You also wanted to take a different spin on everything that's going on in the world today. I mean, in the liner notes, you say you wanted to create something that speaks not just to our struggles, but to our triumphs. Has the
Mhm.
attention, which is long overdue, to the struggles, particularly post George Floyd, meant that the triumphs have taken a back seat in both the national consciousness and in the conversation we're having?
I think so. A lot of people focus on our struggles and they focus on the pain, and these things are, always they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere, they're constant. And so people know about the suffering. And specifically, I talk to these composers and I said, I want you all to be able to write, and to choose your own the text. We presented them with the text that inspired them. But I told them that I want them to focus, if they want to, on the joys, the passions, the triumphs. We love love. We love moving ahead in society. We love the positivity. And so I think that that's what I wanted to show. A lot of people know that the Black story is a story of only suffering. No, I want to talk about the triumphs. I want to talk about the joys. I want to talk about the relationships. And so that was really important in Rising.
You also wouldn't have the great work that came out of the Harlem Renaissance if it was strictly about the pain, would you?
No, absolutely. And one of the things I tell people all the time is that we are humans who have the same story. Our story about, all the writings of these wonderful, great um, laureates, if you want to call them, tell the story of America. And it is something that we can celebrate. And it is not only a story of African Americans, it's the American story. And so, yes, I remember as a kid reading, um, you know, Langston Hughes Langston Hughes is so celebrated, but reading his writings and reading other people, those inspired me. Those focused, and yes, it partly talked about the Black experience, but it talked about what it is to be a man and what it is to experience love and other things. So I think that that has been really important.
Of the 29 selections that are on Rising, some of the compositions are by Robert Owens and by Margaret Bonds, who clearly predate the project.
Mhm.
What was the process of selecting the other poems to be set to music and the composers who would write that music?
Well, as you mentioned, the music of Margaret Bonds, the music of Jeremiah Evans actually was not. I didn't. What is the word I'm looking for? I didn't commission those pieces, nor of Robert Owens. And the thing I think Rising shows is that the wealth of the different voices and the different approaches in composition and their different influences. You could see some people were greatly influenced by jazz, some by gospel, some by a wide array of things, some by classical, some by Stravinsky. And I love the fact that if you listen to the project, uh, the difference between Sean O'Pebble and Damian Sneed, the difference between Damian Sneed and Joel Thompson, the difference between Joel Thompson and Jeremiah Evans. And so there's a wealth of different styles and different voices that I hope people will appreciate in this project.
Were you first inspired by these pre-existing pieces and then decided to add more, or did you have the new pieces commissioned first and then realize, there's a wealth of material that already exists that we should take advantage of as well?
Well, in thinking of the project, I wanted to give space to these young composers. And during the pandemic, I had an opportunity to be engaged in a lot of thought, a lot of online visibility, talking about different issues. As you said, we endured the whole George Floyd thing, and people were reaching out to me wanting to know about, what is the thing that is lacking. And we talked about the fact that people aren't given the opportunity and they are not having the chance to get their voices out there. So I wanted to blend new commissions with existing things, and also as someone who's a frequent recitalist, present the works of these people that people don't really know about, like a Jeremiah Evans, like Jeremiah Evans, like, oh my gosh, like Margaret Bonds, like as I mentioned the other, before, Robert Owens. Robert Owens has incredible music and people don't present it in a recital. And so if I get out there and to do an album and then obviously subsequently a tour, I think a lot more people are going to know who these writers are.
There was one decision in the liner notes that I read that I thought was particularly intriguing. Um, and also I thought was really interesting because it makes the listener be proactive, which is
Mhm.
you do not put any information as to who wrote what poems in the liner notes.
Right.
And after listening to it the first time, I have some of them I knew, but I spent the next 40 minutes looking them up to see who had written these poems. And in the cases where I didn't know the writers, I would do a deep dive. I assume you are trying to inspire people to be participants in this project.
Absolutely. I wanted people to go and to search and to know, because if you go and put in Google, if you go right now and say Harlem writers of the Harlem Renaissance, there are not three. There are tons of them. And there are a lot of people. People didn't know who Arnold Bontemps was. People didn't know who some of these other people, these other writers who have made such amazing contributions to the canon of writing. And so I want people to go in that rabbit hole and to search. Oh, let me see this. Oh my gosh, I've even heard this before, and I didn't even know that it came from Claude McKay. And so that's a part of something that I'm thankful that I can be a part of the exploration that I hope people will take a really deep dive.
Now, imagine a conversation with a label would be, what, are you kidding? We have to let people know who this is. Was that a battle?
It wasn't, and I think they respected our decisions, my team, what we wanted to do. I think they were happy and everything was well thought out. I have a wonderful team that I work with. And so that was by our design. And I think the label was like, okay, you get it. I've done work before. The last album I did, Amici Valley, was also on Warner Classics, and so they were happy to let us lead, and they were a wonderful part of the project as well.
Now, amongst all the writers whose poetry is included in this album, it is no surprise, however, that Langston Hughes is the predominant voice on the album. Um, what makes his poetry so appealing for composers, since countless composers have set his words to music?
Well, I think it's accessible, and I think uh, there are some people who have a real gift. Uh, they are prolific in their writing. They can write on a number of different subjects. And I think Langston Hughes is someone who's been able to show that and demonstrate it. Even with the composers that we took, the six ones that we worked with on the album, we gave them the opportunity to choose from a list of writings and composers, and many of them focused on Langston Hughes, not because it was easy, but because it inspired them. And I think things that are inspirational and give your music, if you think about your own particular style of writing and someone that can bring that to life using those things, I think that was the real key. And so I think that's the reason why many of these composers that wrote for Rising, but also the ones before predating the project, and there are so many others, they wrote with the words of Langston Hughes because it was meaningful to them, and they felt that they could say something with their own artistic voice using his work.
Now, what are you able to say with your own artistic voice when you get to sing lines like "A lady named Day fainted away in the dark," which I think is spectacular, or "In your silence, every tone I seek is heard"?
Yes, Robert Owens. Uh, I fell in love with his writing, and some of his songs are about 30 seconds, but they're impactful. Um, it gives me an opportunity to explore, to be expressive, and performing this recital that is all in English. As someone who does a lot of recitals that are in different languages, and even in the different languages, I like to explore expressivity and to really be meaningful. But the weight of the word, how it falls on a language that is your own, it's different. It's different. And so when you use the music and use the writing style, how these people can highlight the word. For me, it's important to be able the lady named Day fainted away in the dark. The setup for that has to be right. And so people feel the gravity of the situation sometimes, using every tool that you can from a descriptive standpoint, but also a musical and artistic standpoint. That's what I do, to try to focus on the text and to couple it both with what I'm given from the poet and the composer and my voice all come together, hopefully to create a special moment.
Well, they certainly do. You mentioned that one of the pieces that Robert Owens does, it's 32 seconds. So that's the shortest piece that you have on the album. You have
Yes.
another album that's almost another song on the album. I believe it's Romance, which is 8.5 minutes long.
Yes.
So what do you see as the challenges for the composer, and by extension, the challenges you face in getting the complete weight of something across in something that is 32 seconds and also sustaining all of that through 8.5 minutes?
Well, there's a couple things at play. In the one that's 32 seconds, I don't have long. And I have to be succinct. I have to be intentional. Not that I'm not in the one that's 8 minutes and 32 seconds. The thing that I'm given in the one that's 88 minutes and 32 seconds, this is Romance by Sean O'Peblo, is that he was really specific, saying that the beat quality needs to be a certain amount of time. So even if I want to sing this, if I'm adhering to everything he says, if I think this should be 7 minutes and 15 seconds because I take a faster tempo, I'm being told by the music and the rest and everything else that I can't go faster. And that was deliberate. And it creates this thing. You feel the tension, you feel the underpinnings. We're talking about romance. And so in this piece, you get the idea from what he creates and all of these things that you can even express them in your own way. For me, it's and all these gestures from a musical standpoint to create the atmosphere he wants. He finds that it takes 8 minutes and 32 seconds to express this. He's explicit in that. And so that's what as an artist, I want to adhere to. The one that's 32 seconds, get in, we say, get it and quit it. So that's what I do.
Well, I love the use of silence in art anyway. I think silence is almost more impactful than the use of music itself. And as somebody who's sung Rossini, who has sung all of these poems, on this album and countless other projects, what do you see as the power that silence gives to music?
It is so powerful, and oftentimes, as you mentioned before, in bel canto we don't get the chance to build silence in. But here you hear people saying, and even in talking, they will say that there's the pregnant pause. And even when you have these pauses, there's tension in the pause, and the way you lead up to this, and what you say after this, and the way myself as an artist or a performer, can hold the audience in the palm of my hand. and to really be able to lead and think in a way that they're with me on that journey, the power of what's been said or what's coming is really highlighted by that moment of silence. So it's extremely powerful, and it's a tool that many of them use quite well in the Project Rising.
It's interesting to just one more thing on romance, because I think it has the best last line for that sums up this entire album. The poem with this music is complete.
Yes.
Do you feel that music completes these poems in a way that they, that adds to the completion that the original writers already had?
I think so. I like to think that all of these writers would be pleased, that they would be satisfied. I think if, W. Du Bois heard Robert Owen's pieces, he would say yes. If Arna Bontemps said, heard Jeremiah Evans, his piece Lost Illusions, I think he would say, no, that was George Johnson, I believe it was, on the Lost Illusions. I believe that she would say yes. And I think it is complete, especially if these composers, which I believe they have done, captured the true essence of what the writer wanted to say. And yesterday we performed one of the recitals, our first of the recitals, and there was, after I sang this last line in Sean's piece, the poem with this music is complete, there was an exhale that you understood that people were on the journey. And so that was one of the moments that I was most pleased with.
Yeah, that was your first performance yesterday in Boston. So you've given birth to this project in the public realm by doing live performance. What stood out to you most about what you accomplished in that first concert and what you need to accomplish in the concerts moving forward?
It taught me a lot. Pacing from a mental and vocal standpoint, the way we set the recital up already, some of the higher pieces for my voice we put later on. But we have to make sure, I have to make sure that I keep in mind that some of the more taxing things from a vocal standpoint come later, and I want to maintain a certain level of freshness. And so it is exhausting to go through all these various styles, because if you think about the vocalises of Carlos Simon, uh, he challenges me in a way that some of the other ones don't. Rhythmically, musically, some of the things that he puts there, all of them write so well, but they all have their own specific things that they are insistent, that they are absolutely married to, of how their music should be performed. And so to be able to take all that in and be able to put it together in an organic way for a recital is a lot. I am a bit drained, but I'm energized in the thought that I think I can approach it from a better way, from a mental standpoint, also a vocal standpoint, in the upcoming recitals.
I believe it's Peace that has you singing very high Peace four times. And as
Yes.
I heard that, I was reminded of the line from Angels in America that Tony
Mm-hmm.
Kushner wrote about
Mm-hmm.
how only a sadist would make the word free in the Star Spangled Banner the single most impossible note to hit.
I've had that experience before when I did the opera 1984. I was honored to be a part of Laura Mazel's work that we did at Covent Garden in 2005. And I remember him writing something for me. We had a conversation before I was involved in the performance, and he said, "How high can you sing?" And I said, "I have a fairly high voice." He said, "Can you sing a high D?" I said, "Sure." So when I get the score back, it has seven high Ds, all on an eval, which is not necessarily the best thing. So I was saying, "New speak," and I was like, "Wow, I should have probably said that that needs to be a more open and comfortable vowel for me in that range specifically." So yes, some of these writers challenged my ability. The wonderful thing with living composers is that you can go and say, maybe we could change the word that would, or when this happens. And so, not that it's comfortable, but it's more comfortable. And everybody was very flexible. So, yeah. Sean's piece, I think, is the one that taxes me a little bit more. Um, Peace is high. Yes, Jasmine, Jasmine. I told her you did a number on me, but I hope she's happy with what I did.
Right. Now, some of these other composers haven't had their work set to music in anywhere near the same volume that Langston Hughes has.
Mhm.
What do you think they would think if they got a chance to hear all of this and hear what you've done with it? Do you think they'd say, it's about time somebody caught up to what I wrote?
I think so. I hope that they would say, why don't you record this one? And these are the ones that I want to give to you. And maybe you inspired me to write something else. Not, I don't think so highly of myself that I would inspire them, but I hope me giving voice to some of their works in areas and spaces that they wouldn't be known, I hope would inspire them to either write more or to present other things for me to record. And to be honest, I think a lot of people approach don't seek out the writings of these wonderful these writers that just contributed so much, is because they think it's only for black people, it's only for the African American experience, but that's not true. And what I'm trying to do with Rising is, as I said before, to expose a lot of people that they will find for themselves and say, oh my gosh, I've been missing something that can enrich my life so much too and inspire me. So I hope that that will be a part of this project.
Well, I have to say, in doing the research to find out who the authors were of these poems and learning a little bit about their background, I hope to God somebody makes a movie about Georgia Douglas Johnson,
Yes.
because
Yes.
this is a woman, for people who don't know, in Washington, D.C., had the S Street Salon for 40 years, where people would congregate and discuss creativity and art and what was going on in the world. And it seems to me, if ever there was a role for someone like Viola Davis to bring Georgia Douglas Johnson to life, would be astonishing.
And I think she would be an obvious choice because I think she is someone with great depth, great understanding, and yeah, would bring it to life. But just as you said, there's so much, there's so much people don't know about our experience. They don't know. They don't know about the people, the hardship that people had to endure, and the odd jobs that they had to do that wasn't their main profession before they became the writer that they're known to be, and how they were at every turn probably not given the opportunities to advance in different things. But despite all of that, they rose out of these situations to become these people that we are inspired by today, and that their music will go beyond their lifetime.
Just
Their
as you
words.
are, thus the title of the album, right?
Absolutely. That was the thinking. And so we hope that this will speak and have some resonance that people will, really gravitate towards this project.
Now, even Langston Hughes knew that there was music in his poetry. I mean, there was a 1958 album that I was able to dig up since listening to your album, called "The Weary Blues with Langston Hughes,"
Okay, I didn't
which,
know it. Yeah.
it's a jazz album, and it's with the Horace Parlan Quintet.
Mhm.
But the second side is all music led by Charles Mingus.
Okay. Oh
So
my
he,
God.
so even Langston Hughes knew there was a musicality to his writing, didn't he?
Well, I think they all did. And you have these people who, being in a hot spot like New York, could you imagine? I mean, the great jazzers, they were all there. Some of the great songstress, they were all there. New York was a hotbed. The great Sidney Poitier moved from Nassau, Bahamas to be in New York City. And he was a dishwasher before he became the great actor that he was. And it was because he saw a movie with a cowboy on it and he wanted to be an actor. I mean, he came where? To New York. The great Charlie Parker was in New York. The great Miles Davis was in New York. All these wonderful writers of the Harlem, New York Renaissance, New York. So I'm sure there was some intermingling. I'm sure that there was some cross pollination and inspiration amongst themselves that maybe was even inspired by the music of, they didn't say it, but maybe they couldn't get a melody out of their head that, Miles Davis played, or the great Dizzy Gillespie played, or Maceo Park, or all these wonderful, and then it inspired their own creativity. I know myself, as someone who's a singer, there are a lot of different things that inspire me. If I go to MoMA and look at the art there, or I walk around a certain area, me as I think I take all these things in by osmosis that make me a better communicator. If I can experience the green of the grass, if I can experience the just the I remember going to South Africa and feeling the weight of the society there. So much inspires me, and I'm sure these people, all being together in New York, were inspired by one another.
Do you wish you could go back in time and visit that era?
People say that all the time, and yes, part of me says that. Um, I would love to be a part of that energy where everybody's fighting so hard to make it. It would be hard. And I tell people all the time that I am here today because people went through great difficulties for me to have a bit more access to some of the things I'm fortunate to do. So, yes, I think they worked harder at it back in the day. I think our accessibility is easy to go to YouTube and in 1 hour know so much about these wonderful instrumentalists, singers, writers, because we have that access right at our hands. It wasn't that way in the past, but we also didn't have, we weren't clouded and muddied by a cell phone that constantly goes off as well. So it would be nice to touch back in that era and learn a lot. And I think um, it'd be a wonderful experience.
Do you think it's possible to have another era like that?
I hope. I hope. Um, Today we have to question authenticity because we have the contributions of so many. Um, we've been given a lot, but I think it's important for people of this time, like myself and others, to record. I think it's something that we have to say. We want to contribute to what the 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 span of life, what the whole history of life and how it progresses, even beyond 2000 into 3000. We can't even think of that because I won't be here in however many years from now. But I think people of this time have something to say, and all the outside factors that affect who we are as people and artists. I think that will be important for people in the future. But just as I'm saying that, so much of what I've learned from these writers, from these musicians of the past, make me the artist that I am today.
You told Broadway World that Cycle of My Being was very cathartic for you.
Mhm.
What has the process of recording and now starting to perform Rising been for you?
It's been cathartic in the sense that I feel like, it's a labor of love. It's something that it wasn't hard to put together, and this was um, something that I was a part in producing. The idea came from me. As I said, it grew out of Rising. Excuse me, it grew out of the pandemic, having been at home and essentially grounded to the point of beat to Rising now. Um, when it happens, when it comes together, when you have the actual project in your hand, when you can have the last take in the recording studio after getting these 5 bars wrong 15 times, and actually realizing that's a F sharp instead of an F. And all of these, like I said, all of these different styles bringing this together and how exhausting that was. When it finally, the project was done, that was like a big sigh of relief. But then putting it in front of people is another thing that is, you don't know until you get through it. Um, so as I finished yesterday, it was like, I realized that it is a project that works even in a recital setting. And putting these all together in English, it's a responsibility for me to be a communicative and an expressive artist with a lot of colors and text painting and specificity and intention and variation and dynamics and colors. There's so much. I just can't sing the words because I don't think the weight of every word isn't the same. And so it took some homework to get to that level. And now that I feel the audience responded in a super positive way, I'm very, very happy and excited to grow with this project even more.
I was going to say your journey's just ultimately beginning, Lawrence, isn't it?
It is. It is. Already I was sitting in my hotel room and just laying in the bed and thinking of things that I could do better. And it's because I'm inspired by what I'm saying, by what I'm singing, by what these composers have to say. And so many of them will be in attendance in Carnegie Hall, and throughout the process, Jeremiah Evans will be there, Shano Peblo will be there, Jasmine Barnes, Joel Thompson, Damian Sneed, all of the Carlos Simon, they'll all be there. They will. Of course, Margaret Bonds is no longer with us, but nor is Robert Owens. But having these people be there and hopefully them being satisfied by what I've done is the biggest gratification for me.
Great. I have one last question for you, and I'm going to ask you about something that Langston Hughes said. He was asked about the purpose of art, and
Mhm.
his response was, perhaps the mission of an artist is to interpret beauty to people, the beauty within themselves. How does Rising allow you to interpret the beauty within yourself and by extension share that with your audience?
I like to think of myself as a vessel, but in being a vessel, I think people look at you and people will make assertions about you. People will maybe size you up and try to imagine what it is that drives you and all the things that contributed to your education. As I said before, me being an expressive artist is about sometimes challenging my own self. What more can I do? What are the creative, the special moments that I can create? For me, there isn't a quantifiable perfect recital. I don't think you can quantify what perfection is, but I think it is important as an artist to try and create special moments. And I think the way that I can do that is with thought and intelligence. As I work with my young singers, I work at a couple different places. Juilliard is one of them, and a couple other places where I do master classes. I tell the students all the time, to make sure that you don't ruin the payoff. And some of that is leading them to the water so they drink, but the time that they drink is by design. We can't give them the payoff that will be far more effective if it's in the right place. And so, how do I do that? I do that with musicality, with intention, making sure the high point of whatever specific song is at a certain place. And so that takes a lot of thinking. It's not me just getting on stage, singing the right notes and rhythms in the right times. It's so much more than that. Someone told me before that the last thing you do is sing, and all of the work comes beforehand. So, getting that in line and having thought that out and gone through that, having performed it already, I feel now that I have a really good grip on what I want to say and being a more expressive artist.